Before she became a household name, Sarah Palin dreamed of something entirely different, and the life she lives now is nothing like the one America remembers. In 2008, she stood on the world stage, smiling beneath blinding lights, hailed as the future of American politics. But behind that iconic smile was a woman torn between two worlds: fame and isolation, ambition and faith, the roar of crowds and the quiet of Alaska's endless snow. Who was Sarah Palin before she became a political lightning rod? And how did a once beloved governor end up living a life so far removed from the spotlight she once owned? To understand her story, we have to go back, long before the rallies, the headlines, or the cameras. Sarah Louise Heath was born on a cold February morning in 1964 in a small hospital room in Sandpoint, Idaho. Her parents, Charles and Sally, were young and hopeful, a teacher and a secretary, chasing opportunity. When Sarah was only a few months old, the Heath family packed everything they owned into an old car and drove north toward a new beginning in Alaska. The frontier was harsh but honest, a place where winters bit hard and people learned to survive by their own hands. Sarah grew up surrounded by mountains, snow machines, and the sharp scent of pine. She learned to hunt, fish, and face the cold without flinching. In her small town of Wasilla, she wasn't just another kid, she was a competitor. On the basketball court, she was fierce. Her teammates called her Sarah Barracuda, a nickname that would follow her for years, part compliment, part warning. It was the first glimpse of the determination that would later define her rise in politics. But behind that iconic smile was a woman torn between two worlds: fame and isolation, ambition and faith, the roar of crowds and the quiet of Alaska's endless snow. The noise, the crowds, the city pace, it wasn't her world. Within months, she packed up and left. What followed was a blur of transfers, majors, and long drives between campuses. 4 different colleges in 6 years. To some, it looked like indecision, but to Sarah, it was determination. A quiet belief that somewhere she'd find her purpose. Eventually, she did, at the University of Idaho. There, she studied journalism, drawn to the art of storytelling, to the idea that a single voice could reach thousands through a television screen. That same year, her confidence, and maybe a spark of competitiveness, led her somewhere unexpected: the world of beauty pageants. In 1984, the small-town girl from Wasilla stood beneath glittering stage lights, competing for the title of Miss Alaska. She didn't win, but those who watched her saw something magnetic: the self-assurance of someone who believed she was destined for more. It wasn't the crown that mattered, it was the spotlight, and Sarah had just learned how good it felt to stand in it. When she graduated from Idaho with a degree in journalism, she returned home to Alaska, ready to tell stories, not just live them. Her first job? A sportscaster on a local NBC affiliate in Anchorage. Dressed in crisp blazers, her voice confident and clear, she delivered scores and game highlights with the precision of someone who'd spent her youth chasing basketballs across frozen courts. It wasn't politics yet, but it was practice. Every time she looked into the camera, she wasn't just reading headlines. She was learning how to connect, how to lead, and how to speak to an audience that couldn't look away. What she didn't know was that this local newsroom was the first step toward a campaign trail that would take her to the edge of national fame and the breaking point of her private life. In the mid-1980s, Sarah's life took a turn toward something steadier, or at least it seemed that way. She reconnected with a familiar face from her high school days: Todd Palin, the quiet, athletic boy she'd once shared classrooms and basketball games with. What began as teenage chemistry grew into a lifelong partnership built on shared grit and the rhythm of Alaskan life. They eloped in August 1988, skipping the ceremony and the headlines. No cameras, no fanfare, just 2 young dreamers signing a paper in a small-town office, ready to build a life together. While Todd spent long, exhausting seasons working in commercial fishing, Sarah helped where she could: hauling, sorting, keeping the books. It was hard, physical work, but it grounded her in the everyday reality of the people she would one day represent. Then came the pull of something larger, the sense that Alaska needed new voices, that her community deserved better answers. So, in 1992, the former sportscaster with the bright smile took a leap into politics. She ran for a seat on the Wasilla City Council. It was a modest campaign, a few flyers, a few speeches, a whole lot of door-to-door persuasion. And it worked. She won. By 1996, she'd climbed higher, elected as the mayor of Wasilla, a job that placed her in charge of snowplows, school budgets, and small-town pride. Her leadership style was simple but sharp, part neighbor, part drill sergeant. To some, she was refreshing, finally a public servant who talked straight and got things done. To others, she was divisive, uncompromising, unwilling to bend. But whether they liked her or not, everyone noticed her. And in politics, being noticed is half the battle. After 2 terms, term limits forced her to step aside, but not for long. Because by 2006, the woman who once read sports scores on local TV would take on an entire political machine. She ran for governor of Alaska, and against all odds, she won. At just 42 years old, Sarah Palin became the youngest governor in the state's history, and only the second woman ever to hold that office. Her approval ratings soared past 90%. To the people of Alaska, she was the symbol of change, a mother of 5 who spoke like them, hunted like them, and promised to shake up the old guard. But behind the confident speeches and power suits, cracks were already forming. Every decision she made seemed to spark both loyalty and outrage. She built pipelines, battled oil companies, and faced accusations that blurred the line between personal and political. Yet for a brief, shining moment, Sarah Palin was unstoppable, a small-town girl turned political powerhouse. And that's exactly why Washington came calling. In the summer of 2008, the world suddenly knew her name. John McCain, the Republican presidential nominee, had made a bold and unexpected choice: Alaska's governor, Sarah Palin, as his running mate. Almost overnight, she went from the quiet calm of Juneau to the blinding flashbulbs of the national stage. Crowds chanted her name. Cameras followed her every move. To millions, she was refreshing, an outsider who spoke like a neighbor, not a politician. To others, she was divisive, uncompromising, unwilling to bend. But whether they liked her or not, everyone noticed her. And in politics, being noticed is half the battle. When she walked on stage at the Republican National Convention, her voice didn't shake. She stood tall beneath the roaring lights and declared, "We have nothing to hide." It was part defiance, part warning, and the audience loved her for it. Yet behind the applause, the pressure mounted. Every interview, every speech, every small misstep became a headline. She was dissected, mocked, praised, and criticized, sometimes in the same day. The woman who once spent her mornings checking fishing nets now faced satellite trucks parked outside her house. Her family, once shielded by the remoteness of Alaska, was thrust into the glare. Her teenage daughter's pregnancy became national gossip. Her accent was imitated on late-night TV. Her very identity became a punchline and a political rallying cry at once. And through it all, she smiled. But those close to her said the campaign changed everything. The endless scrutiny, the exhaustion, the realization that fame could be both weapon and wound, it left scars. When McCain and Palin lost to Barack Obama and Joe Biden that November, Sarah returned to Alaska, her approval ratings already slipping. She was no longer just a governor. She was a symbol of ambition, controversy, and the shifting tides of American politics. For many, that loss marked the end of her rise. But for Sarah, it was something stranger, the beginning of her transformation from politician to pop culture figure. When the campaign ended, Sarah Palin could have disappeared quietly into the Alaskan wilderness, but that wasn't her way. Instead, she stepped into a new arena, one that didn't require ballots or policy briefings, the world of entertainment. In 2010, she invited America back into her life through a reality series called Sarah Palin's Alaska. The show, airing on TLC, followed her family through rugged mountain climbs, fishing trips, and scenes of domestic chaos. There she was again, the same confident figure, smiling in windbreakers, guiding her children across ice fields, describing the vast beauty of her home state. To her supporters, it was a glimpse of the real Sarah, raw and unfiltered. To critics, it was the final act of a politician turned celebrity chasing relevance. Either way, people tuned in, curious, nostalgic, or simply unable to look away. The series lasted only one season, but it reignited something in her, the performer who once dreamed of TV lights long before politics. From there came books, talk show appearances, and speaking tours. Her memoir, Going Rogue, became a bestseller. For a while, she seemed unstoppable once more, the woman who refused to fade, who kept reinventing herself when others expected her to retreat. Yet fame, as she'd learned the hard way, is fleeting. The crowds thinned, the headlines softened. And slowly, Sarah began to step back from the relentless noise of public life. In 2016, she returned briefly to politics, appearing on stage to endorse Donald Trump. Her speech was fiery, charged with the same electricity that had once defined her rallies. Trump called her a special person, and for a moment, it felt like the spotlight had returned. But once the campaign ended, so did her second act. By the late 2019s, Sarah Palin was living a quieter life, back in Alaska, surrounded by mountains and family. She still gave the occasional interview, still drew headlines when she spoke, but the rhythm was slower now. The woman who once captivated America had found refuge in the stillness she'd left behind decades earlier. For over 30 years, Sarah and Todd Palin seemed inseparable, partners in both politics and survival. They'd weathered the Alaskan winters together, raised 5 children, and endured the chaos of the campaign trail side by side. But in 2019, the story changed. Todd filed for divorce, citing incompatibility of temperament. After 30 years, the bond that had carried them through triumph and turbulence had finally cracked. Sarah later admitted that the moment she learned about it, through an attorney's message, left her stunned. The woman who'd faced down political storms and media fire suddenly found herself alone, standing in the ruins of a life she'd built from scratch. The divorce was finalized quietly, without the shouting matches or tell-all interviews that usually follow public splits. No child support battles, no bitterness in court documents. Just a shared decision to divide assets, to share custody of their youngest son, Trig, and to move on. In public, Sarah smiled through it all. In private, those close to her said the heartbreak lingered. She'd always been known for her resilience, but this time, the silence around her spoke louder than any speech she had ever given. Since then, the former governor has kept her distance from politics, choosing instead the calm of her Alaskan home. The same landscape that once raised her, the wide rivers, the endless forests, now holds her in a quieter chapter. Occasionally, she's seen at charity events, local gatherings, or alongside friends who still call her Governor. As of 2022, she's been linked to retired NHL player Ron Duganay, a man who seems to share her love of open skies and second chances. And that's where we find her today, far from Washington, far from the spotlight, surrounded by the stillness she once escaped decades earlier. Her name may no longer dominate headlines, but her story endures, as a reminder that fame fades, politics shifts, and even the strongest voices eventually seek peace. At 61, Sarah Palin's life is no longer about campaigns or crowds. It's about reflection, the long look back at what once was, and the acceptance of what remains.